Agile for Humans is brought to you by Audible.com. Get one free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/agile. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player, including Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time by Jeff Sutherland, and Crucial Conversations by Carrie Patterson. Visit www.audibletrial.com/agile to enjoy your free audiobook today.
Processes and tools dominate today's Agile discussions, but we are devoted to the individuals and interactions that make it work. From the beginner to the veteran practitioner, we have something for you. Welcome to Agile for Humans.
All right, we are still in Indianapolis at the Agile Indy Conference, one of the more impressive conferences in the Midwest. I think we're all having a great time here. Joining me now, Allison Pollard.
Yes,
Hi, Allison, how are you?
Good.
And Barry Forrest. Barry, how are you?
I'm doing well.
So you two are co-presenting this year at Agile Indy, right?
Yes, I love doing co-presentations. I love having someone else to bounce off of.
I thought you were going to say do all the work.
That's the secret, actually.
That's the secret. No, Allison, I think many of the listeners will recognize Allison very quickly. Very accomplished speaker and well-known all throughout the Agile community. So really excited that you're able to join us. Barry, you're co-presenting. What are you guys talking about here at Agile Indy?
So we chose team dynamics and communication to talk about.
Okay.
I have a very developer-centric background, and Allison has obviously the very coach-centric Agile background. So we tried to find something that the two of us could talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So as you two come together, so Allison, very talented Agile coach, you yourself very talented developer, you come together, your viewpoints are starting to mesh. What are the learnings there? I'm sure you guys picked up some different insights and different ideas. You know, what's come of just, not necessarily the talk, but just of the collaboration?
Barry's really easygoing, and that's kind of what attracted me to I think have him as a co-presenter in the first place. Because we have different styles, different backgrounds, but we do blend together, I think, pretty well. But I was surprised. So part of our presentation is going through the DISC behavior profiles. And so both of us have done it a number of times, and we showed each other, what our charts look like. And Barry's is actually different than I expected. I come up to him at the office, and he's always very sociable, very friendly. And so I had it in my head that he's a very strong I, very strong influencer, very people-oriented. And in fact, his chart showed that he's also a strong D, which is not something I expected.
Well, a lot of times folks miss the D, being driven and task-oriented and result-oriented. But in development teams, if somebody else is taking that role, I gladly let them have it. But if the inmates are running the asylum and we need to get stuff done, the D comes out in spades, and it's like, poof.
So for the listeners out there not familiar with the DISC model, can you guys run through that real quick, just how that works, what the outcomes look like?
Yeah, so there's 4 different behaviors that you're looking at, and each of us have all 4, but some are stronger than others. And so D stands for dominance. Person that's going to be driving things forward, very competitive, task-oriented. I is influencer, and like I said, they're very social, very interactive. S is going to be steadiness, and so they tend to look at the group dynamics and making sure that there's consensus within the group. They might be a bit resistant to change because they want to keep things very calm, but those people are actually the unsung heroes of teams. They're often doing the grunt work that no one else is interested in. And then the C, which is compliance, or as I like to think of it, more like critical thinking, very detail-oriented, very analytical. Again, more task-oriented, less people-focused.
Right.
Yeah.
And making sure that you get all of the details of the user story done.
Yes.
D's want to get stories done. C's want all of the sub-items done.
Got it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like, since we all have these traits, as you're looking for these dynamic teams and putting teams together, this could actually be a really interesting way to make sure you have good coverage.
Yes,
right?
and I actually like doing it as a workshop with teams at the beginning for that reason, because you can start to see some of the dynamics that we might encounter later as we're working together.
Well, it seems like this could also play into working agreements, kind of like a lift-off type situation. I mean, it seems like the applications, especially at inception, could be really powerful.
Well, one of the teams that I worked with last year that I'll be joining again starting on Monday, the manager over the team was like, he saw the disc profile from our recruiting staff, and he's like, oh, I need a high D. Barry, I'm so glad you're here. I've got 3 C's. They'll analyze everything to death, and nobody will bother to try something. So I basically had carte blanche to kick butts and make them do something, try it, and if it failed, no big deal. But we've got a stake in the ground, and we tried something, and there's a direction at that point.
Right.
So you can take your temperature after that, and did it work? Yes, great. No, well, what do we need to do instead?
So the workshop that the two of you did here at AGILE, so was this about building out this profile and then how that plays into your teams, or how did you bring this to, I guess, more of a conference setting?
Yeah, so we actually did a really quick activity to have everyone identify what their dominant or like their strongest behavior was. And so then they worked in small groups to define out like what kind of communication do you like and what communication do you not like, based on that behavior, and have everyone report out to the large group so we can start to see the differences more clearly.
So a quick activity to figure out your dominance. What is that? I'm kind of curious now. What does that look like? What is your activity?
Basically, we had everyone stand up in the room, and we said, okay, come to the front of the room if you're more fast-paced, and if you're going to be more on like the questioning side and more reflective, go to the back of the room. Which was kind of fun because, of course, Barry and I start to split immediately of like where we fall.
Right. So Allison goes to the back of the room, and I'm like, all of my people, the fast and come to the front of the room, Fast and the Furious up here.
Right. Yeah. And so then once you're on, that half of the room, we start breaking it down into, okay, now are you on the left or the right? So are you going to be more accepting and warm of ideas? And more, again, kind of people oriented, or are you
Waldorf and Sattler? That'll never work. What are you talking about?
So I would have gone to the back of the room and then more to the accepting of ideas.
Yeah.
So where would that put me?
High S.
High S. Okay.
Yes.
Good. Now I know.
Now you know.
So you're a supportive glue guy.
Very good. So we would have been a great team.
We would be a great team.
I mean, this is perfect right here, right?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, it sounds like it was a really good workshop. Glad that you were able to bring that here. I think it's these ideas, especially in the Agile community now, about dynamic reteaming, building teams, how people work together. We're not just talking about Scrum anymore.
Right.
We're not just talking about these methodologies and practices. We're actually getting back to the people and the interactions and how all that stuff works. So it's really great to see. As far as applying this, it sounds like where you work, this is a very important piece of your culture. What have you seen from a cultural perspective that, having this process, and I won't out where you guys are at, but knowing the company that you work at very well, or at least through some other interactions, knowing that culture is very important, what have you seen from this method that's really influenced the growth and the sustainability of your culture?
So we have, every consultant does the assessment, and it becomes part of our profiles that go to clients, like Barry mentioned. But we have all of our office staff, corporate staff, do it as well. And so in our previous office, we had a giant poster hanging with a number of our faces on it to show who was where. And so it becomes part of our common language. And so I know, like, one of our salespeople that I've been working with quite a bit, she's a high I, I'm a high C, which means that we are polar opposites. And so we adapt to one another. We know that going into conversations that we are adapting to one another to communicate well. From my side, it means, I probably want to talk to her about something, a little bit more urgent, work related. But in order to like really get her time and
Engage her.
And yeah, like work with her, I actually need to allot even more time for that conversation so we can connect as people. You know, she's going to want to have more conversation up front of, you know, how are you doing? And you're like, how was your weekend? You know, and I want to hear about her. Right. And you kind of make that gesture of like, oh, let's move on, let's move on. And that might be going on in my head. But I've learned over time that it's actually the most efficient way for us to communicate is to accommodate one another's styles.
Yeah, that adaptation, the ability to just to respond to what the other person needs, crucially important. I think that's the sign of a healthy culture. Right. That I actually care about how you two want to be communicated with. You care about how I want to be communicated with, and we find a way to do that. And I think what sometimes I think we miss is if I'm not engaged, I'm not listening. If I'm not listening, I'm not able to help you. Right. And you can't help me. And it's fascinating stuff. So thanks for sharing that. Barry, beer brewing. How have you applied your agileness to making that wonderful substance? Or do you see parallels in your... So for the listeners out there who aren't familiar with Barry, he's a beer brewer, a very, I think that's one of your passions, right?
Award-winning
beer brewer. So have you found that applying Agile to beer, like there's some parallels, or is this just totally two separate types of conversations?
I think it's more separate than a parallel, but there are lots of experiments in brewing. Sure. They just take 2 months to figure out. Because there's the work you put on brew day with coming up with a recipe and the 6 hours to actually make the beer. But then you've got like a month to 2 months where the yeast is doing its thing and really making the beer. You're just giving the yeast sugar water. It makes the beer. Right. But so
fermentation takes a long time, right?
Yes, the fermentation takes a little while longer. And so it takes 2 months to find out if your experiment worked or not. And I've learned to change one thing at a time so I can track back to, okay, this change was good, this one not so much.
Yeah. So what do you specialize in? What kind of beers do you like to make?
I started out brewing stouts, oatmeal stouts and Russian Imperial stouts, and the big, bold, chocolatey, dark fruit beers. I've had more widespread acclaim with my wheat beers.
Oh, wow.
Those go over really well at the office.
So he supplies the office with beer.
He's our guy, yeah. So our office actually has two... I'll keep it at 2 kegs. Wink.
Yes.
And so, Barry makes sure that we have good craft beers on tap for us.
Sometime I sneak one of my beers on the tap. So.
There you go. Well, very good. Thanks for filling that in. It's just a side interest. Always been interested in it, but haven't jumped into it yet. I need to make that first experiment and give it a shot. But very cool there. So as far as other engagements, other speaking topics, what else do you have going on? I know, Allison, you have many different topics.
Yeah, this year's been really nutty, for lack of a better word. I submitted different proposals to a number of conferences with different co-presenters. Next thing I knew, most of them had said yes. Yeah. And so it's actually been very exciting because I'm coming at it as how do I always help others understand coaching skills and apply them in Agile. And so it starts weaving an interesting thread through all these different talks that I'm doing this year. But the next one's in Keep Austin Agile, end of May. And then I'll be at Agile 2017 doing 2 sessions.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
So it's going to be a long week.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
Very cool. So when it comes to this co-presenting, this has been a topic on the show quite a bit. I know that Amitai recently, he and I co-presented in New York. We're going to get an episode out about that because I think we learned a lot from that particular experience. Ran a few experiments with the way you overall do a talk, and I think it turned out well. We had Lisa Crispin on a little bit ago. I think the listeners will remember that episode where she's really been leading the way. I think one of the big names in our community basically saying, if you're new to speaking, I'd love to pair with you.
Yeah.
And so this thing seems to be building and actually starting to become a thing. Why have you moved towards that space? Like, what is it? I think I know what brought Amitai and I to it. I'm just curious, as you start co-presenting with more people, what is it that keeps bringing you to do that more and more?
So I guess I started in a co-presentation model. And it was very much like both of us were equal partners. We both are standing at the front of the room the full time and, play off one another and contribute and engage throughout. I've seen a number of folks that take more of what I call like a divide and conquer method.
Yeah.
That one I'm not as much a fan of personally. I find it more awkward for my section of, okay, if they hit me with a question, like I'm the one that has to answer it.
Or I'll read the first
pressure.
5 slides, you read the last 5 kind of thing?
Yeah. And so it always just hits me kind of wrong when I do that. So I like both of us are like fully engaged, playing full out. And so for a while I was, co-presenting with other Agile coaches, especially ones that have gone through professional coaching training. So we can both, digest some of those big concept, big skills and figure out how to bring them into Agile. And then as I've done so many conferences and I've gotten really comfortable as a speaker, I hit that point where I realized, I really need to diversify a bit. And so I actually had worked with a technical coach for a long time at one client, and he and I did a co-presentation on, what were the technical coaching things that both of us were supporting in the organization. Him working with the developers, more hands-on, but what was I doing with the full development team, the full Scrum team, to help support those ideas in being implemented in sprints. And then I think most recently, a couple of folks at our company said they want to get started as speakers. And I said, I'm willing to help you out if we can find the right topic, the right conference, and we're making it happen.
Yeah, what I found was, too, it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Right? So in New York, like I said, Amitai and I got to, and that was my first co-presenting experience. And so he and I mean, the listeners know that we're on this podcast a lot together, so we riff off one another. We're doing that over Skype. But as far as like together and doing a presentation, we hadn't done that before. And what I found was if I got stuck, he could jump in. If he got stuck, I jumped in. It was just it was just good collaboration. And it was a lot of fun. Because there are points where someone asks and Amitai knows this stuff too, but when they go real deep into leadership management, these big organizations where I have more experience than perhaps he might, he would say something, kind of trail, I would jump in, and then when someone starts hammering him with this technical, test-driven development type question or something like that, I haven't been a developer in 15 years, so I have, I don't know that stuff anymore. So I would trail and he would jump in. I just found it actually, to link back to Josh Karyevsky's keynote that we just got to see part of, the safety was increased. It was really neat how you actually felt a little safer going out on a limb with an answer, because if you were to fall a little bit, you've got someone else that you can trust to kind of pop back in and recenter the conversation. It was just an interesting kind of learning from that bring a little more safety to the whole process. Yeah,
I would agree with that.
So... Well, cool. How are you liking Agile Indy? I know we've all, as speakers, have been talking about, even at the lunch, just what a great organization this is, how well they put this together. What are your impressions? I know this is your first visit.
This is my
your second. You were here. So there's a reason for that mistake. So the listeners also know that I was supposed to be at Agile Indy last year. My daughter Emmeline arrived. My wife shipped early, right? We had, she did great. But she came a little early. I wasn't able to make it, so I missed Allison's first time.
Yes.
So now this is your second visit. I think this is much bigger than last year.
I am amazed at how much it has grown just in 1 year. And even, this is a local regional conference, and we're talking 700 plus people. That's incredible. The Scrum gathering at the end of April was 1,100.
Yeah.
So it's really not that far off in terms of numbers.
Yeah, they really are approaching the size, the venue, the organization maturity, all of those things of a major conference. I mean, it really, to call it just a Midwest or a regional event anymore probably isn't fair. I think they have hit that more national kind of conference. They have people flying in from all over the country. They have local people like me. They have people like you who flew in, I think, from Texas. They've got people from probably each coast that have come to speak at this now. It's really amazing what it's turned into. So just really neat to see, and it's great that it's in my backyard. That's kind of fun too, right? Finally, the one conference I don't have to fly to.
Well, and it's also really exciting, when it's your local community and you, of all people, recognize the talent that's coming in, this like influx of new and different ideas, and to be able to like witness that, I imagine is rather exciting.
It is. It's exciting as an outsider. I know I've talked to a number of the board members here at Agile Indy. I mean, they're not surprised. I mean, they've put in the work, and a lot of these people have pioneered Agile in Indiana, and they've helped spread it through their own time, effort, expense, and now I think they're just reaping what they've sowed. It's really that kind of organic growth over a number of years and just that effort. So it is really cool to see. It is very satisfying that people are flying into Indiana of all states, arguably one of the best states. No, it's my state, but they are flying into Indiana to have an Agile conference or to speak at one or to attend, and it is pretty satisfying. You wouldn't think that necessarily that would happen, but it is. So very very grateful to the Agile Indy organizers and just the board for having this event, for putting it together. I know that we all had a great time speaking here.
I think
we'll definitely, everyone we've talked to so far is looking forward to submitting next year.
And it's so nice when you're as a speaker, you don't necessarily get to feel like you're part of the conference.
Right.
We're taking time to do our mental prep and maybe last minute revisions, so we don't get
vomiting in the restroom
or freaking out,
pacing,
anything.
Anyways,
but that means like we don't get to see as much of the conference typically, and even when we are in other sessions, our brain might not be fully there. But the organizers have done such a great job and had a lovely dinner for us last night that really makes a big difference, I think, in appreciating the speakers and making us feel welcome. Yeah.
So, Barry, is this your first?
This is the very first.
So I think you've come in at a great time and place and with a great co-presenter. So this is that's got to be exciting for you.
It is exciting.
So welcome to the speaking world. I hope we see more of you as we.
Well, thank you.
As we travel around the country and hit these events. So we are at our time box, though.
Awesome.
As good Agilists, we respect our time boxes. So at this point of the show, it's really open to the two of you. So how can listeners reach out to you? How can they contact you? Do you have anything you'd like to promote? Is there anything that people should know about? And I'll open it up to the two of you.
I'm not going to promote anything specifically. I keep a running list of my speaking engagements on my blog. It helps me keep track of them as well as anyone else to find me. So that's AllisonPollard.com. And I'm also on Twitter at Allison_Pollard.
Nice. Yeah. Barry, how can people continue talking to you?
Twitter.
All right.
B Forrest with 2 R's, 30.
Nice. So we will get links to the sites, some of the other conferences that we've talked about, and the Twitter handles all in the show notes so that people can continue the conversation. As for me, not promoting anything during these Agile Indy talks, I just want to make sure that people are aware of the conference. I hope as people listen to this, they download the show, they hear what a great event and venue that Agile Indy has become, that they consider the conference, and just want to say thank you again to the organizers on the board for just a great speaking experience. So with that said, I'm your host, Ryan Ripley. Thank you everyone for being out there and listening. Thank you for the downloads, the feedback. Keep your questions coming. We are going to do a show very soon where we have taken all of your Twitter questions, your voicemails, everything that you've sent. We're going to get a great panel of people together and just go through them. And so your questions will be answered. It'll be a listener-centric show that's coming up soon. Get your questions in so that we can address those as well, but that's coming up very shortly. With that said, thank you for being out there. Thank you for sharing the show. And everyone, have a great night.
Thanks for listening to Agile for Humans. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop us a question on Twitter @AgileForHumans or visit agileforhumans.com.